If we could.
Okay.
Thank you all for attending. This morning's meeting is a subcommittee meeting for the old nursing home. We just completed a tour of the existing nursing home, the old nursing home, and from there we've come to here. I'm Mark McConkey, chairman of the subcommittee. I'd like to, the purpose of today's meeting is to be able to bring the full delegation up to speed as to the opinion of the subcommittee and get an update on the pellet boiler and the rehab of the old nursing home. Prior to today's meeting, I had sent a list of questions just last week to Commissioner Sorensen in an attempt to direct this meeting to go through the items that were included in there. First item on that list was if we could receive just a short history. And I'd just like to say I'd like to keep the conversation to the questions and as direct as we can so that we can move through this. So Commissioner Sorensen, if you could give us a brief history of the process, and then we'll go down through the specific questions after that. If you would, please.
You want to know where we stand presently?
History, how we got here, if we could. What was the reason for taking on the pellet burner, pellet stove?
Okay, how we got here, we had a building committee, and I believe there was 14 or 15 people on that building committee. 4 from the delegation, 3 commissioners, nursing home, I believe, and there were 4 or 5 outside people. Eileen Bolander from Grafton County, who just built a brand new nursing home. Another guy from Wolfboro, Gene Goodwin. Jim Martin from Brookfield. Those are the ones that I remember being on that committee. There may have been a couple of others. Yes, there was. The chairman of the council at the nursing home.
Maureen Spencer was on it also.
Maureen Spencer was on it, yes. So from there, we went to put out the bid. Bonapage and Stone was one of, I believe, 5 that bid on the project. And we selected, the building committee selected or recommended that Bonapage and Stone be the manager of the project. Also EGA, after another meeting, EGA, we had, I'm trying to recall, 3 or 4 people that came in to design the building, and EGA was hired to do that. From the outset, the building committee decided that we would separate out maintenance and laundry.
Before we go there, if I could. In the very beginning, when you were contemplating a brand new nursing home,
right,
I would imagine the first thought was that you were going to heat that building. Was your first thought from day one with that you were going to use a pellet boiler, or was day one that you were going to continue using maybe a more efficient propane operating heating system? When you first started into this process.
The very first, we started looking at something that was green. I looked into wind power. We found that up on the mountain there wasn't enough wind miles per hour to do the windmills. We looked at underground for geothermal, and we talked with the Merrimack nursing home, and they said there was a lot of cost involved in electricity and pumping electric around, pumping the water around, and they had a lot of problems with breakdown and maintenance on the pumps. We perhaps didn't do a really good job on looking at solar power, but at that time it was more efficient to provide the heat rather than electricity. And so we did go with pellet. We did look at chips, and when we looked at chips was going to take up too much space. They weren't that efficient. The species were mixed. They weren't uniform. Storage would have been a big, huge storage area for them. Trucks coming in all the time, delivering chips. So we went with pellets.
Thank you. When prior to this building committee and prior to the new nursing home, was there a study for a standalone building? Was that done prior for the extension service? Was that study
Yes, there
before
was.
that?
Yes, there was. And that was, I believe, over $1 million that they were talking about, and that was going to be built in back of the parking lot here.
Correct.
And that was a green building.
Was the final finding from that building that perhaps green energy was not was driving up the cost of that building? Hadn't you looked at geothermal at that point? Hadn't you looked at solar? And hadn't you considered wind at that time?
I believe that was considered about the same time. I don't know whether it was before, during. It could have been during. But I know they were looking at almost like a double wall to reduce the energy loss.
All right, thank you.
It was a green building.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I believe in retrospect, looking back, that the additional cost of using geothermal and those other services actually made that building cost prohibitive. So the decision to, my question too there, the decision on, I'll come back to you, Representative. The decision to put the boiler in the nursing home was a shared, and that was a recommendation from the building committee?
That's correct.
Thank you. Representative Babson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, let's get it straight. I was chairman of the building committee for the cooperative extension. It was not decided because it was too expensive for thermal or anything else. When we ran the Young Architects of New Hampshire ran a contest, and we selected, I think it was 6 or 8 of the ones that were submitted. The least expensive one in their estimate was $1.2 million, and we had originally thought about $750,000, and so it had nothing to do with geothermal or wind or pellets or anything else.
Thank you, Representative. Was your recollection that the study was done prior to the nursing home study, or was that at the same time? I thought it was before.
I thought it was about the same time.
Okay, thank you. But did your, Representative, did your committee had looked into geothermal on that building as a source? And
No,
other
we hadn't.
green, you didn't get that far?
They just supplied whatever the architects call a topographical sketch of a building and their ideas, and there was no further research done on the cost of doing that. It was the Young Architects estimates that we worked with.
Thank you.
For site location.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I could, Commissioner, the need for the boiler came, you said, you're saying that the need for the boiler was from the beginning?
That's correct.
And what was the Commissioner's original turnkey price? And turnkey price to me would be walk in the door and Bob would adjust the thermostat and away we go, turnkey.
We didn't have one. To be honest, it was dependent upon the grants, the $400,000. Otherwise, the pellet boilers would have cost us $6,000 or $7,000, $100,000.
So
once we got the grants approved, then we knew it was a good thing to get into.
So when you were doing your original costing for the building, did you had decided to go with pellets, you had no cost. When you released your first costing, did or didn't have a price?
When we released our first costing?
If I could, your building committee came to a decision from day one that you weren't going to use a traditional heating system, whether it be more efficient propane or whatever, made a decision that you were going to go with a pellet boiler.
We were going to reduce the cost of the propane It was 42%, I believe, more efficient to go with the pellets than propane.
Okay, but you did not have an estimate at that point as to what it would cost to have that installed and move forward with your project?
We had at least three pellet boiler companies come in. The one we decided on, one was from Lyman Oil in North Conway, and there was another one. And we went with the present one because it was American-made. The other two were foreign-made, and our grants would not support a foreign-made system.
And your original grants or the original bid that you got for the American-made boiler, which would satisfy the need to move forward with your grant, was for what price?
$312,000.
But no installation was known at that time.
That's correct.
Okay. And when you costed out, when you started working on the cost of the building, had Bonnet, Page and Stone provide an estimate for the installation of the pellet boiler, and was that done prior to the commissioners moving forward? What I'm saying is the building committee worked with you and decided that this was going to be the best thing.
Right.
That we could save 40% of what we're spending, and they're in agreement and they wanted to do that. But when they made that decision, did they know what an installed price of that was going to be?
No. They had estimated in the beginning that it was going to be $600,000 to $700,000 to put a pellet boiler system in. And when we got the $400,000 grant, then we knew that $400,000 to $700,000 is about $300,000. So that probably would have been the cost, but we didn't know that at the time.
So if I could, the original cost estimates were in that $400,000 to $700,000. Is that what you just said?
Correct.
And since that original $700,000, that's
$600,000 mark.
six
to $700,000.
$600,000 to $700,000. Has that price now increased or decreased?
No, it's about the same. $400,000 for the piping and the boilers, and $300,000 to fix up the building and put the install. Not that's the wrong word to use, I guess, right now. But to put the boilers into a facility and connect up the electricity, the mechanical end of it, both at the new nursing home and with the old nursing home, and pipe it into the nursing home, the old nursing home boilers, so that that building can be heated as well as the new building.
The if I believe we're closer to an $800,000 figure, I'll come back to you, Representative. At a $700,000 to $800,000 figure, what's our payback projection in years for that expense in savings on heat?
About 6 years payback.
May I ask one more before I open it up to Representative McCarthy? If you had not gone with a pellet boiler and cost in $700,000 to $800,000, and you had continued to use what the county is traditionally using now, which would be ever increasing efficient propane or gas-fired boilers, would you have put the new gas-fired boiler in the old nursing home, or would you have put that in the building that you constructed at this time? Had you ever thought about that, or you totally threw that idea out?
No, we have gas-fired boilers in our new building as backup, and we have gas-fired boilers in our old nursing home. We took one of those boilers out because we didn't need it and moved it over here into the new nursing home building. And at what we're budgeting right now is $153,000 to heat the new building with propane.
Thank you. That $150,000 to $155,000 is with the pellet boiler, or where we are at this point because we don't have the pellet boiler running?
That's propane.
Propane,
151,000 is what we're budgeting for in 2012.
12. Do you remember by chance what it was costing to heat the old building with propane?
No, I don't.
I didn't ask that point. Thank you. Representative McCarthy, you had a question?
Yes, for the record, and I'm quite confused. I have
You
the
can answer
original
that one.
proposal from Biomass, from whom we purchased the boiler. And in it, it says that the installation, startup, and owner training is included in the price. 10 tons of fuel delivery is included in the price. Now, it goes on further to define installation. Installation, boiler placement, and all equipment assembly, silo placement, erection, and fuel conveyance installation, commissioning, startup, and initial tuning, and training of the individuals. Now, I assume that if it's, startup, that means everything has to be done. Everything has to be hooked up. It has to be working. How can you do that? How can you start it up if it's not working and everything's, going? So the installation in the proposal, and I have it right here, was included for the $312,000 price. But yet now I understand we're paying $375,000 to hook it up. Not install it, to hook it up. That's what I was told. I'm confused.
Representative Solomon?
Well, I honestly don't understand the confusion. It very specifically says what their concept, what their installation included, as the representative just enumerated, and nowhere does it say that they're going to hook it up to our system. Once it is hooked up, once the hookups are all done, they will then train people to operate it. They will commission it. They will do all the necessary things having to do with finally getting it online.
Thank you. Representative Soren, Commissioner, do you have anything else on that?
No, but I was just handed, it cost for the old building $127,000 to heat it.
$127,000 is what it cost us in the last year to heat it?
In 2010.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Merrill?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused also, because I was told a while ago that extra cost was for wiring. The wiring basically will be in the boiler. Now you're telling me it's to hook up to the new building and hook up to the old building. What is it, and what does hookup consist of?
It's hooking up the new building. The pipes run to the foundation wall.
They're
So
already
that's
in,
good.
right?
The piping is already in.
Yeah.
That was part of the 200,000. It's hooking up from that pipe in the foundation to the present boiler system in the new nursing home. And you saw over there at the old nursing home where it comes into the building. That has to be hooked up into the boilers, and then piping run from the boilers across the corridor to our old boiler system in the old nursing home, so that the pellet heat can generate heat for the old building as well as the new building. So it's mechanical, it's all the piping, it's a cost item. Changing over that room to make it fireproof, taking out the asbestos tile, putting in double doors, raising the ceiling, that's included in the $375,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Steve, I'll open up for public input a little bit later. If you have something brief to ask, be happy to take it.
It's specifically to this.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the Carroll County Renewable Energy Grant. Project cost. The engineering department of the architectural firm EGA Architects has estimated that the cost of the purchase and installation of a wood pellet burning heating system will be $500,000.
Thank you. Representative Merrill?
It seems as though the thing here that's extremely different and got everybody confused is what's your definition of installation? If I buy something and I want it installed, I expect it to be running when I take it over for the price I got. And yet that doesn't seem to be the case here.
I think if they wanted to start up the boiler and it could run, it would run, but it wouldn't be connected to
Wouldn't be
anything.
connected.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Bob?
Just through my experience in the construction trade, when a manufacturer, and I hope I'm not shooting myself in the foot here, but when a manufacturer talks about installation, I think that they're saying that they will bring in their equipment, they will assemble their equipment, because it's all in pieces right now. They're going to bring in their equipment, set it on the pad, assemble their boiler, assemble the silo, the feed system, but that does not include any of the extraneous piping, electrical. It is strictly related to their boiler and their fuel system. I think that's what biomass engineering's definition of installation is.
Thank you, Representative Merrill.
Put that on a simpler scale, which doesn't apply here, but maybe it does. If I were to go and buy a new dishwasher, and I wanted the whole thing installed, they'd bring the dishwasher in, leave it on the floor, and I have to get somebody else to hook it up.
Right.
That's not the way it works.
Thank you.
Apples and oranges.
Yes, Representative McCarthy.
Again, I'm still confused because if you look at their proposal on the installation, it says commissioning, startup, and tuning. So I would assume in order to start it up, it would have to be all hooked up. How are they going to start it up if it's not hooked up properly? And so according to them, that's what they will do, install it to the point where they can start it and tune it up.
That's what they told me.
Thank you.
That's right.
I would agree with Representative McCarthy on the point of tuning. You can turn a hot air furnace on in a room and give a heat source to it, but you have no idea whether that's going to work properly in a building or not. So the only way that they could have tuned that would be if it was hooked up to the source where it was going to heat and then take it from there, because I imagine there's quite a calibration process there. So it would seem to me that the term used should have been investigated or explained more than it was. If we could continue on, if there's nothing else at this point. When it was decided that the boiler, maintenance, and laundry could remain in the old nursing home to save money, what documented facts did the commissioners have, cost estimates hand, that led them to believe that this was indeed the case? And I'll pick up from the point, and you can tell me where this started coming together. The decision was made by the building committee that you were going to heat the new building with a pellet stove. It's the opinion of the commissioners now that that was going to be a $600,000 to $700,000 expense, which I would subject that the building committee must have known what that number was. Knowing that number, tell me how we went forward then from that point. That we would, what facts did you have and costs in hand to lead you to believe that the boiler, maintenance, and laundry should remain in the old nursing home
Okay.
and not be considered in the new building?
Okay. If we looked at the square footage cost of the new building, I think we had first estimated it to be $270 per square foot. Since then, it came down to $250 a square foot. If we look at what the boiler takes up, well, let's start with the boiler. It's 720 square feet. That's about $180,000 based on $250 a square foot. If we look at maintenance, that's another $180,000 at 720 square feet. Laundry was a
650.
I forget the square footage on
650
laundry.
square feet.
650 square foot was another $162,500, and I believe it came up to $522,500.
Thank you. When you're looking at a building and you're speaking with your engineers and your architects and so forth, and a square foot number is put on something, you're taking into consideration the living space, and it's more expensive to build a nursing home than it is to build a two-bay garage. did you ever look at the fact that if the space was not to be used and that you had to increase the size or add a building that wasn't entirely exterior the same for a maintenance building, which is quite the same, did you ask for what that number would be, that if you just had to have what we see right now, which is an open envelope ready to put the boiler, maintenance and so forth in? Because there's no way that cost is $270,000. Were you privy to any knowledge of any expensing to that effect?
I'd have to ask EGA if they have anything to add to that.
Please.
Do you have any, try to answer his question?
I know we ran a lot of numbers for the committee.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of combinations of things. If I recall, the discussion on the pellet boiler was several things. One was cost of building, Mark, and I think back in the early stages, I think if you went back in committee notes, you would find that we probably told them that we could do about anything to that existing nursing home for about $100 a square foot, a typical renovation, if the structure is sound. Comparing that to a $200 to $250 square foot nursing home. And if I recall, some of the people in the room were on the committee, so I'm sure they can help me with this, but it's been a couple of years. But I would say, I know we had the discussion of renovation versus new, and it was combined with the idea of mixing things like a smokestack and that type of stuff, and why you might not want that immediately adjacent to the nursing home where you had that existing facility. I don't think there was ever a decision made absolutely to keep that building, but there was clearly a lot of uses going on over there, and the committee considered all of them combined. I don't know that we looked, back then I don't think we looked at a boiler house standalone.
If I could, if you were putting up a building other than a nursing home and you were making a recommendation today and you needed a couple thousand square feet, can you give me a boilerplate number, what square footage price you'd be looking at?
You're absolutely right. If you took everything else out of play and said that nursing home was gone and you were building just a boiler house and that was it, or a maintenance building, we ran numbers on a maintenance building, you'd be more around $100 a foot.
Thank you.
In that range, depending on what you're putting up.
Thank you. Chip, if you would.
Just to clarify a couple of things that happened over the course of events during the building committee. One of the reasons why the building committee didn't have a firm figure on the installation of the wood pellet system is because we were looking at two alternative ways of going into that. The first was to own a pellet system. The other was a proposal by a company from Maine that was going to sell us pellet heat on a BTU by BTU basis. They would install the equipment, they would own the equipment and service the equipment, and we would buy heat from them. That was rejected for a couple of reasons. First of all, we felt, or the building committee felt, uncomfortable with the idea of being married to one company for a fuel supply for a 10 or 15 year period. And secondly, when the government grant money became available, that option became more reasonable from the standpoint of financing a pellet boiler. And then it became apparent that if we were to include the pellet boiler system paid for partially by a grant into our nursing home building, that would subject the whole new nursing home to the Davis-Bacon rule, which would mean that all of our labor costs for the new building would be escalated to that Davis-Bacon level of payroll. That was one of the major driving factors that I remember from the original building committee to keep, along with the space cost considerations of expanding the new building, but expanding the price of building the new building because you've added that pellet boiler system to the mix. It really pushed me over the edge to try to put it into the old building.
Thank you. Would you believe, though, that would you believe that in Tilton, the school system there is using a similar process that you're talking about? They're using biomass that they are doing exactly what we're not doing. And I would think that if you went down that road, and they're actually, I believe, returning money back to the school system there. And would you believe that on the being tied to one source for fuel, we've been tied to one company, one source of fuel I'll bet for more than 10 years already with Eastern Propane. So I wish we'd had that clarity before we'd entered into an agreement there. We'll move on.